A federal judge is accusing the Trump administration of stonewalling in the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. In a scathing 8-page order, District Judge Paula Zenise called out the Justice Department. Take a look at this. She writes, the administration has, quote, failed to respond in good faith, and their refusal to do so can only be viewed as a willful and intentional non-compliance.
A federal judge just dealt the Trump administration another massive blow in the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the Maryland man who has become the poster child for everything wrong with Trump's immigration enforcement. Judge Paula Zenise ruled that Immigration and Customs Enforcement cannot re-detain Abrego Garcia while they try to deport him. And the reason why is absolutely stunning. The Department of Justice under Pam Bondi doesn't even understand basic first-year law school concepts. Let me explain what happened here, because this is one of the most Kafkaesque immigration cases I've ever seen. Kilmar Abrego Garcia is a Maryland man married to an American citizen with 2 children. Last year, Trump's ICE put him on a plane in the middle of the night in shackles and illegally deported him to El Salvador, where he was tortured upon arrival. They did this despite having a court order explicitly prohibiting them from sending him to El Salvador because he feared gang violence there. Multiple federal judges ordered him brought back to the United States. So Trump's DOJ retaliated by manufacturing criminal charges against him in Tennessee, claiming he's a human smuggler. But here's the thing. Abrego Garcia has said he's willing to go to Costa Rica, which has offered him refugee status, and the Trump administration has refused. Instead, they're trying to send him to random African countries like Liberia and Cameroon, thousands of miles from his family, purely to punish him for standing up for his rights. And now, Judge Zenise has ruled they can't detain him because they don't even have a valid removal order. The DOJ tried to fix this by getting what's called a nunc pro tunc order, which basically means going back in time to fix a clerical error. But the judge said that doesn't work because they're 5 years too late under constitutional law. Let me show you the report, and then I'll break down exactly what the Trump administration did wrong and why this matters. All right, let's break down what you just heard, because this case exposes how vindictive, incompetent, and lawless Trump's immigration enforcement has become. And it shows how federal judges across the country are repeatedly slapping down the administration for violating basic constitutional rights. Let's start with who Kilmar Abrego Garcia is. He's a Maryland man married to an American citizen. He has 2 children. He was picked up by ICE and accused of being a gang member, specifically MS-13, even though there's zero proof of that. In fact, every court that's looked at the evidence from federal judges in Tennessee to New York to immigration judges has rejected the claim that he's a gang member. But Trump's ICE didn't care. In March 2024, they put him on a plane in the middle of the night in shackles and deported him to El Salvador. And here's the critical part. They did this in violation of a court order that explicitly prohibited them from sending him to El Salvador because he feared gang violence there. The DOJ later had to admit in open court that they illegally deported him. And you know what happened to the lawyer who admitted that? He was fired for telling the truth. When Abrego Garcia arrived in El Salvador, he was immediately tortured. That's what happens when you send someone back to a country where gangs are targeting them. Multiple federal courts ordered the U.S. government to bring him back. Even the Supreme Court got involved and sided with Judge Zenise, saying, yes, you need to bring him back for due process purposes. So the Trump administration brought him back, but they were furious about losing in court. So they retaliated. They manufactured criminal charges in Tennessee, claiming he's a human smuggler. The evidence? 4 years ago, he got pulled over during a traffic stop with 7 people in his car. That's it. Federal judges who've looked at that evidence said it's insufficient to keep him in jail and released him. And here's where it gets truly vindictive. Abrego Garcia has repeatedly said he's willing to leave the United States. He knows under Trump he's eventually going to be deported. And he said, send me to Costa Rica. Costa Rica has offered him some form of legal status or refugee protection. He'll go there voluntarily. And the Trump administration said, no, we're not sending you to Costa Rica. We're sending you to Africa, specifically Liberia or Cameroon, countries where Abrego Garcia has zero connection, no family, no ties, nothing. Why? Pure punishment. The administration even offered him a deal. plead guilty to the criminal charges in Tennessee, and we'll send you to Costa Rica. He refused because he's innocent. So they said, then we're sending you to Africa. Now let's talk about the legal disaster the DOJ created. Judge Sinis had previously ruled that ICE couldn't detain Abrego Garcia because they didn't have a valid final order of removal from an immigration judge. Under constitutional law, specifically a case called Zadvitas v. Davis, the government can only detain someone for 6 months after an immigration judge issues a removal order. After 6 months, if they haven't removed the person, they have to release them. They can start a new removal process, but they can't keep detaining them. The Trump DOJ realized they had a problem. They never got a proper final removal order back in 2019. So what did they do? They went to an immigration judge and got what's called a nunc pro tunc order. That's Latin for now for then. It's essentially a legal trick where you ask a judge to issue an order today, but date it retroactively to fix a clerical error from the past. The DOJ came into Judge Sinis's courtroom and said, "Judge, we got the removal order. See, it's dated January 2026, but it relates back to 2019. And Judge Sinis said, exactly, that's what a nunc pro tunc order does. It means the thing happened back in 2019, which means you're now 5 years late in trying to remove him. You've waived your right to detain him under the 6-month rule in Zadvitas. And here's the embarrassing part. Judge Sinis had to give the DOJ lawyers a lecture on what nunc pro tunc means. She wrote in her order, and I'm paraphrasing here, a nunc pro tunc order doesn't rewrite history. It doesn't reset the statute of limitations. It doesn't give you a do-over. If the order relates back to 2019, then the 6-month clock started in 2019. And you're 5 years late. This is first-year law school stuff. The fact that Pam Bondi's Department of Justice doesn't understand this basic concept is stunning. These are supposed to be elite federal prosecutors, and they're making arguments that would get you laughed out of a moot court competition in law school. And Judge Sinis didn't stop there. She pointed out that the government has done nothing, absolutely nothing, to show they have an actual plan to remove Abrego Garcia to any country. They keep saying they're going to send him to Liberia or Cameroon, but have they made any actual arrangements? No. Have those countries agreed to accept him? Unclear. Are they taking concrete steps? No. So Judge Sinis concluded, there is no good reason to believe removal is likely in the reasonably foreseeable future. The government has done nothing to show that Abrego Garcia's continued detention in ICE custody is consistent with due process. Translation: you don't get to hold someone indefinitely in detention based on vague promises that maybe someday you'll deport them somewhere. Now, CBS News mentioned that Abrego Garcia has been living in Maryland under strict pretrial release conditions from the Tennessee Criminal Court. He's under the custody of his brother. He can't travel outside Maryland without permission. He can only leave his residence to go to work, attend religious services, see a doctor, or go to court. Those are extremely restrictive conditions, but they're better than being locked up in ICE detention while the government flails around trying to figure out where to deport him. And here's the broader context. Next week, the federal judge overseeing Abrego Garcia's criminal case in Tennessee is holding a hearing on whether to dismiss the entire prosecution for vindictive prosecution. Multiple judges have indicated they're sympathetic to the argument that the Trump administration manufactured these charges purely to retaliate against Abrego Garcia for winning his immigration cases. This case is the perfect example of how Trump's immigration enforcement works. They pick someone, they violate their rights, courts slap them down, and instead of saying, okay, we'll follow the law, they double down. They retaliate. They manufacture criminal charges. They try to send the person to the most punitive destination possible, and they keep losing in court. CBS also reported that Tricia McLaughlin, the DHS spokesperson who's been all over Fox News defending the administration's deportation agenda and calling critics domestic terrorists, is leaving her position. She's being replaced. And you know why? Because the administration's immigration policies are increasingly unpopular with the American public. Trump's approval on immigration has cratered. People are seeing stories like Kilmar Abrego Garcia and the 18-year-old honor student from Honduras who was shackled and deported while visiting family at Thanksgiving. And they're realizing this isn't about public safety, it's about cruelty. Like, subscribe, and share this everywhere, because a federal judge just ruled that Trump's DOJ can't re-detain Kilmar Abrego Garcia because they don't understand basic first-year law school concepts about removal orders. Judge Shinnis had to lecture them on what a nunc-pro-tunc order means. The administration is trying to send Abrego Garcia to random African countries purely for punishment instead of sending him to Costa Rica where he's willing to go. And next week, a judge in Tennessee will hear arguments on dismissing the criminal charges for vindictive prosecution. This is what happens when lawlessness meets incompetence.